let's talk about the first side of the age-crime debate, the criminal propensity position. I also call this is also the traditional position, the traditional idea about why the age-crime curve is out there, what the relationship is between age and crime. And the people who believe in this first side believe in what we call a criminal propensity argument. People that we've already read about in this class who believe in this and endorsed this at the time of the debate were researchers such as Gottfredson and Hershey. Now, as a brief reminder, Gottfredson and Hershey are also the people that wrote the general theory of crime in 1990. And they wrote the theory about self-control, basically stating that the level of a person's self-control, which is established early in life, is going to play a role in how much crime they commit throughout their whole life, right? So they were the ones that said, if you're somebody who never established a high level of self-control, if you have low self-control, you're going to commit crime and other types of risky, impulsive behaviors throughout your entire life. So the criminal propensity position is the one that Gottfredson and Hershey got behind, and they are probably the strongest voices of the criminal propensity position. And what they did to state their support for this side is they came out in 1986. This is before their theory, by the way, but this has played a big role in developing their theory. Came out in 1986 and said that across all times, across all time periods and places, the relationship between age and crime, the age-crime curve that we all know now, does not change. And what they did is they went back historically and pulled out data from the 1800s, the early 1900s, from Europe. And they showed that no matter really where you look or what time period you're looking at, this age-crime curve, with the peak of offending being about 18 to 20 and declining after that, is very stable. So their explanation for that is that the effect of age on crime is that age matures almost all people out of crime. The effect that age has is over time you basically age out of offending. As you mature, you stop committing crime. So they really didn't believe that the criminal career research agenda that had started in the 1980s was very valid. They didn't think that you really needed longitudinal data to study this. And think about it from their perspective. If they can show that no matter what you do and what data set you look at, everybody stops committing crime in their early 20s, why bother to really study it any further? Why try to break down why exactly that is if that's the way it's always been and it's never going to change? So they didn't really feel like our field should waste time and money by developing longitudinal data sets to study this because, according to them, you can solve most questions about crime by looking at cross-sectional data. In other words, if you have a set of data, let's say you go out there and you gather data from a city, and you have people in that data set ranging from age 13 to 60. You don't need to follow those people, each individual person, because you have people at each data point to look at. And because everyone's going to follow the same pattern, you can just take a cross-section, a glimpse at one look in time, and do research that way. And that's cross-sectional research is the way that most people, at least up to that point, had been doing research, and many people still do. So the point here is that this isn't just a little academic debate where people were politely writing journal articles back and forth. There was a lot at stake in this argument, because what Gottfredson and Hershey were saying in their paper, in their 1986 paper, was the idea of studying a person's criminal career is not interesting. Even if there are little variations, almost everyone follows the same pattern, so why waste our time? What's more interesting for them is identifying the people who are committing the most crime, the people who have the highest criminal propensity, and studying that. Studying why it is that they have the higher criminal propensity to begin with. So again, there's a lot at stake here in this argument. Gottfredson and Hershey are basically coming out and saying that all of this research that people are trying to do, gathering data over long periods of time, is useless. And you can kind of understand where they're coming from, because longitudinal data, the kind of data that the criminal career researchers were trying to collect, is very expensive. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of grant funding, and funding for criminology research is pretty scarce. So people on this side of the debate, on the criminal propensity side, said, we don't want the meager amount of money that is out there for everyone to try to get. We don't want it all going to longitudinal research. There's billions of dollars, millions of dollars at stake here. People's livelihoods are at stake here. And what Gottfredson and Hershey were saying was, no, this thing that's so costly and expensive is useless. So this sparked a pretty intense debate. You have two really well-respected researchers, Gottfredson and Hershey, saying that an entire genre, an entire arc of research is irrelevant and nearing a monopoly in how much it's taking over research dollars. So that was one side of the debate. People saying, no, because this relationship between age and crime is so stable, who cares about studying the minutiae of criminal careers? That's side one. So again, just to make sure you're clear about this is the criminal propensity position again. This is Gottfredson and Hershey once again. And their idea is that almost everyone follows the same relative pattern. And they kind of concede the fact that if you actually studied people who are, in early childhood, ages 5, 6 through 12, they probably look a little bit more like this orange line that I've put up here than the official data show. They probably were already committing truant delinquent behavior, but these are official arrest statistics that you're seeing in black on the graph. So it might just be the case that these kids were kind of not being brought to official attention early in life. But that's still the relationship that they're suggesting that almost everybody follows. No, what was interesting to them was understanding the difference between people who are going to commit a lot of crime, the people in the orange line there, and the people who aren't going to commit a lot of crime, people in the blue. Because for them, the difference between these two groups is always going to be relatively stable. And what we should be interested in is finding out why these groups became different to begin with. So they acknowledge, yes, everybody does go through a little bit of increase in offending in adolescence, even the people with really low levels of criminal behavior. But criminal propensity is always going to be relatively stable. Those two groups are never going to actually match. People with low self-control, basically for them, are always going to be the people committing more crime. And that's what we should be interested in, not studying the rise and fall in a criminal career. Okay, so let's talk about the second side of the debate, because this is in the 1980s when this debate happened. The reason why it happened is all of a sudden some very prominent, famous, influential criminology researchers came out and defended the other side of this debate. And the other side of the debate were people that believed that studying the criminal career was important. So the criminal career position was something that was backed by, again, very famous, well-written, influential scholars, Al Bloomstein, David Farrington, people that you'll hear about more and more in this field, came onto the side of the criminal career position in the late 1980s and said essentially that no, the criminal propensity argument, the other side of the debate, is just wrong. And the reason for that is there are different factors that can explain behavior at different points in the life course. Assuming that someone's behavior over their entire life is due to one trait, criminal propensity, that allegedly gets established early in life according to the other side of the debate, is useless for Bloomstein and Farrington. Well, not necessarily useless, but they didn't think that it was a thorough explanation of criminal behavior. So people who believe in this side of the debate, the criminal career position, think that it's probably not the case that everyone follows that aggregate age crime curve. It's probably the case that the age crime curve masks a lot of other relationships and career arcs that are going on underneath it. So the point is that the overall age crime curve might be true in the aggregate, but if that's all that you look at, the aggregate. You're ignoring the differences in things like frequency, participation, prevalence, and seriousness of crime of groups of individuals within it. So they really believed that you actually need several models, different models of criminal careers to explain how different people commit crime over their life. Different types of crime, different levels of severity of criminal offending are going to have different types of onset, different lengths, different amounts of duration, and they're going to desist in different ways. So instead of ignoring that and neglecting to study it because of the aggregate research, let's actually break it down and try to study it. That's what this side of the debate believed in. And in order to do that, and again, this is where they really butt heads with the original side of the debate, you need longitudinal research. If all you're looking at is snapshots of people at different ages, you're not going to know anything about what their individual careers were like. So you need longitudinal research to uncover patterns, to be able to understand when someone's began, for how long, when did they desist, what kinds of crimes were they committing. All of that goes into doing longitudinal research. And longitudinal research is time-consuming and expensive. If you start a longitudinal research study and you don't do what Wolfgang did and rely on past data, you have to follow people for years and years before you can make any conclusions or publish results. It's going to take millions of dollars that could go towards quicker cross-sectional data research. So you can understand why this became a very heated debate between the scholars vying for money and funding based on each of these positions. So let's look at this criminal career position again, looking at the age crime curve. So again, what the age crime curve looks like is not being debated here. This is the same curve that I've put up several times. And the criminal career researchers, people who believe in this second side of the debate, don't dispute that this is what behavior looks like in the aggregate. But what they argue is that there are probably multiple pathways being masked by this aggregate trend. It might be the case that, as Govertson and Hershey suggest, there are people who start out committing a lot of problem behavior, commit a lot more of it during adolescence, and then stop. But there might be all of these other criminal propensities and criminal pathways that people might go into. In other words, they're not saying that crime doesn't typically decrease with age. For most of these, and I just drew these as examples, these aren't real trajectories here, but for the most part, yes, almost everyone does stop committing crime in late adulthood, and in mid to late adulthood, but they don't all do it in the same way. And some people don't, and that's something that we need to study and acknowledge, according to criminal career researchers. People who believe in this really believe in the importance of looking at, for example, that purple line that shows people that start committing crime in adolescence and never really stop. You can, according to criminal career researchers, put a very small amount of people into that study. So, basically what they wanted to know was, people in the criminal career side of it say, yes, crime does typically decrease with age, but why? Just saying that you age out of crime is not satisfying. What mechanisms, what processes are at work to explain desistance and stopping from committing crime? That's something that criminal career researchers believe is important to know. And yes, it does typically decrease with age, but why doesn't it decrease for everyone? If it's something that happens due to the inexorable aging process, why doesn't everybody age out of crime? So those are the two sides of the debate. And they sparked an interest in, especially the criminal career side of this, sparked an interest in what we now call developmental criminology. Understanding a person's development and how a person's development over time plays a role in them starting to commit crime, continuing, and either eventually stopping or not. So that's the next area that we'll talk about, is the area of developmental criminology.